Have you ever wondered what happens when a single, very determined voice decides to stand up and tell the entire mainstream scientific community, hey, you might actually be getting the very fundamentals of reality completely wrong? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely dramatic and super direct manifesto from an independent scientist. Now, this isn't just some mild, polite disagreement over a tiny data point. No, this is a massive, foundational challenge to the establishment of physics and mathematics as we know it today. We are going to break down exactly what this author is claiming, the intense questions they are demanding answers to, and why they firmly believe the current academic system is literally failing to provide them.
The absolute core philosophy of this author's argument boils down to just 5 simple words. The scientist should not pretend. It's the battle cry of the entire text we're exploring. The author is basically saying that no matter what a scientist personally thinks or theorizes, their ultimate job is to give clear, honest answers, if they actually have them. The massive grievance here is that way too many experts out there are acting like certain foundational questions are trivial or that they've already been solved, when in reality, they really haven't. The author argues that a true scientist has to either provide rigorous, bulletproof definitions or just have the humility to admit, I don't know. To them, pretending to have all the answers is the ultimate failure of modern science.
Section 1. The duty of a scientist. No more hand-waving.
Moving right along to Section 2, Questioning Mathematical Foundations. Here's where it gets really interesting. The author starts demanding clear, absolute definitions for 3 foundational mathematical concepts. And I mean the absolute basics: number, infinity, and continuity. Now, you might be thinking, don't we already know what a number is? But the author points out that mathematicians and physicists actually tend to shy away from providing ironclad definitions for these things. They just sort of treat them as accepted givens. But think about it. If we can't completely agree on what a number is, or how infinity actually functions, how can we trust the massive, complex equations that build our skyscrapers or launch our satellites? The manifesto is saying that without these definitions, our entire scientific model is basically built on sand. So what actually happens when you press the scientific establishment on these definitions? Well, according to our author, you get incorrect answers that rely on what they call too much hand-waving. We've all seen hand-waving, right? It's when someone glosses over a really complex or maybe flawed part of an argument by acting like it's just super obvious. The author claims that while the establishment insists these questions are already answered, the explanations are just smoke and mirrors. They lack true rigor. Essentially, the author is holding up a giant stop sign and saying, no more hand-waving, give us the proper definitions, or just admit you can't.
This brings us to Section 3, Rethinking Physics and Reality.
Shifting from math to physics, the author poses 2 incredibly deep, almost philosophical questions. First, what are the actual consequences of making distinctions? Like, when we mentally or physically separate one thing from another just to study it, what do we inadvertently lose or change in that process? Second, and this is absolutely crucial for modern science, what are the consequences of making a measurement apparatus distinct from its environment? Especially when you zoom down to the quantum level, the very act of measuring something alters it. The author is demanding that physicists stop and fully account for what happens when we artificially separate our tools of measurement from the fabric of the universe they actually exist within.
There's a massive, fundamental shift in perspective being proposed here. The author asks a really pointed question. Why isn't modern physics based on physical objects that have actual properties instead of just being based on mathematical symmetries? You see, a lot of current physics relies heavily on these mathematical symmetries. Basically, theoretical equations that balance out beautifully on a whiteboard to predict how the universe works, even if we can't physically see the things they describe. Standard models are literally packed with particles that only exist because the math says they have to. The author is challenging this entire setup, suggesting we need a physics grounded in tangible objects with concrete properties rather than abstract math that requires all that hand-waving we were just talking about. And all of this builds up to the absolute heaviest, most fundamental question in the entire manifesto. It's a question that sounds incredibly simple, but literally contains the entire universe. Ready? What is reality made of? The author essentially pauses all their highly technical critiques of math and measurement just to drop this massive anchor. They are demanding that the scientific establishment look past their elegant equations and symmetries and provide a definitive, non-hand-waving answer to the ultimate nature of existence itself.
Let's wrap things up with Section 4, Threatening the Establishment.
So, the author doesn't just sit back and ask these questions. Oh no. They go on to make a brilliantly provocative claim. They state, flat out, I have answered the questions,
and the answers threaten the establishment and current knowledge. Talk about a mic drop. The author is telling us that they aren't just some critic standing on the sidelines. They are the bearer of a brand new truth. And they firmly believe that because their answers are so foundational and so radically different from the consensus, those answers pose a direct, undeniable threat to the entire status quo of modern science.
Of course, the author is well aware that their work is currently being ignored by the mainstream. But get this, they claim that this exact fact, the fact that they are being ignored, is absolute proof of the establishment's inability to answer these questions. They don't see the silence as a dismissal. They see it as a silent confession of ignorance. And here is the real fire driving this text. The author states that once their answers are finally accepted, quote, a lot of nonsense cannot be sold anymore. They genuinely believe mainstream science is currently peddling pure nonsense built on hand-waving and that their new paradigm would just instantly dismantle the whole shebang. They find comfort in knowing that even while ignored, they are fundamentally right.
The manifesto concludes with the author literally throwing down the gauntlet to the entire global scientific community. They ask, perhaps there is someone that can prove me wrong? They even admit that someone successfully proving them wrong would be an act of true science, and that they'd actually welcome it, though they quickly add it would seriously surprise them. So, what do we have here? Is this the manifesto of a lone visionary who actually holds the answers to the universe, or is it simply the ultimate venting of a deeply frustrated academic? Either way, the challenge is out there, so I'll leave you with this. What do you think would actually happen if the establishment finally stopped, turned around, and tried to answer?